All right, good morning, everyone. It's a couple of minutes after 10 o'clock, so I think we'll get started. My name is Joe Quinn. I'm Executive Director of the Arkansas Good Roads Good Roads Foundation. Thanks for joining us on our Zoom news conference this morning, part of the new world we are living in. We are joined today by the folks at TRIP. TRIP is a Washington-based nonprofit organization that looks at the state of roads and bridges and infrastructure in states all across the country. They are with us today to release a new report looking at the state of roads in Arkansas. I think this is an especially relevant time for this. We are living in the midst of a pandemic that has reminded all of us that an infrastructure is more critical than ever to bring our families food and cleaning supplies and prescription drugs that we need on a day-to-day basis. This is also a point in history where we are moving more than ever to being a shop-from-home society, a society that expects goods to be delivered to our front doorstep 12 hours after they are ordered, and people want this to happen whether they are living in a small community or a large urban area. So a lot of changes in our world right now. Most of us don't know what the new normal will look like, but I do think we are at a point in history where we are being reminded that infrastructure matters more than ever. So we are going to walk you through an overview of the TRIP report, and then we'll take some questions. And then we're going to direct you to some information we gave you yesterday where we have local spokespeople in markets across the state who can do local interviews and quotes for reporters who are joining us this morning from around the state. So with that, I will turn it over to my friend Rocky Moretti, who is the Director of Research and Policy at TRIP. Good morning, Rocky, and why don't you walk us through the broad strokes of the report?
Yeah, good morning, Joe, and thanks for welcoming us to release this report. Again, my name is Rocky Moretti, Director of Policy and Research. The report today, and as Joe mentioned, after my comments, and I believe Joe will have a couple of concluding remarks after I speak, if you indicate on the question box that you have a question to ask, then my colleague, Carolyn Kelly, will serve as moderator and allow you to ask that question, and we can respond to that. And also, when you ask the question, of course, let us know your media affiliation as well. TRIP is an organization founded in 1971. Since then, we've done over 600 reports at the local, state, and federal level looking at surface transportation issues, the condition of the system, its impact on the economy, its impact on traffic safety. TRIP, as an advocate for a transportation system that's well-maintained, safe, and reliable, is supported by a coalition of manufacturing, insurance, construction, labor, and engineering organizations that look to us to provide this type of information that is helpful across the country as regions look at transportation issues. This particular report, Arkansas Transportation by the Numbers, is based on the latest data from a variety of sources, including the Federal Highway Administration, the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, the American Association of State Highway and Transportation Officials, and a variety of other organizations. And what we look to do in these reports is really provide a snapshot of the current conditions and challenges that states face in terms of their transportation system. TRIP estimates that drivers in Arkansas, due to traffic congestion, driving on rough roads, and also the impact of driving on roads that oftentimes don't have adequate roadway safety features, is costing motorists an additional $3.2 billion annually. In the Little Rock area, TRIP estimates that the average annual cost to motorists of driving on roads that are deteriorated, congested, and sometimes lacking adequate safety features is $1,673. Those costs include the lost time and wasted fuel due to additional time stuck in traffic that with less congestion you would not be out on the roads. It's the cost of driving on rough roads themselves, which put more stress on vehicles and increase not only maintenance cost of those vehicles, but also accelerates the deterioration of the vehicle. And finally, the economic cost of serious and fatal traffic crashes in which the lack of adequate roadway safety features were a contributing factor. It's not to say that they caused the crashes, but the lack of some of those safety features impacted the severity of the consequences of those crashes. We also in the report include data by region for the Little Rock area, for Fort Smith, for Northwest Arkansas, Hot Springs, Jonesboro, Pine Bluff, and West Memphis. And we've also added onto our site, we have recorded trip staff broadcast quality videos for each of those regions, giving additional information and data for those regions. The trip report finds that more than half of Arkansas's major roads are in poor, mediocre condition, with 26% of major roads rated in poor condition and another 26% rated in mediocre condition. In the Little Rock area, 24% of the region's major roads are in poor condition, an additional 33% are in mediocre condition. We also point out in the report that with vehicle travel across the country and also in Arkansas beginning to come back to pre-COVID levels, what we're seeing is traffic congestion coming back to the forefront. In Arkansas, we've seen a significant increase in travel since 2000, with travel across the state increasing by 26%. In the Little Rock area, the report estimates that the average motor spends an additional 40 hours annually stuck in traffic. This is additional time that would not be spent stuck in traffic if the roadways were more reliable and less congested. The trip report also looked at traffic safety and notes that from 2014 to 2018, there were 2,551 fatalities on Arkansas's roads. And the traffic fatality rate in Arkansas in 2018 was 1.41. That's significantly higher than the national traffic fatality rate of 1.13. Clearly, if Arkansas could get its fatality rates down to the national level as a start, you'd see a significant reduction in traffic fatalities. But admittedly, one traffic fatality is one too many. But there's a lot of work to be done in Arkansas, and part of that is going to be making roadways as safe as possible. We also took a look at traffic safety at the rural level, and the trip report finds that the traffic fatality rate on Arkansas's rural non-interstate roads is approximately double on all other roads. Again, a significant challenge in the state. The trip report also found that on average, 72 people annually are being killed in traffic crashes in the Little Rock area. We know that from a variety of research that about a third of fatal traffic crashes, the lack of adequate roadway safety features, things like paved shoulders, well-designed intersections, rumble strips, all of these cost-effective measures have a huge impact on keeping people safer. And across Arkansas, there's a tremendous need as roads are improved that additional safety features are applied. The report also found that 5% of Arkansas's bridges are structurally deficient. These are bridges that are in immediate need of significant repairs or in some cases replacements, and with the state's bridges continuing to age, what we're hearing from bridge engineers is increasingly the need for these long-term solutions to bridge repairs, not just routine repairs, are going to become critical as many of the state's bridges will reach an age where they're going to need, in many cases, to be replaced, but at least very significant repairs. We also point out that the state's highway system in particular is critical for moving the $226 billion of goods that are shipped across the state. And as Joe mentioned earlier, what we're seeing due to the pandemic, but really an ongoing trend, is continuing reliance on the movement of freight to support our economy. In fact, the latest federal data suggests that freight movement in Arkansas is going to increase by approximately 90% over the next 25 years. So an increasing volume and concentration of large vehicles moving across the state. That's good for the economy, but it's absolutely critical that you have safe infrastructure to carry those larger vehicles, and also very important that you've got the capacity in place. And obviously, as you would anticipate, you've got to do additional repairs because large trucks, although they're critical to the economy, they also put greater stress on your transportation system. The report also notes that as the state recovers economically, as we're seeing across the country, the vital importance of investment in our transportation system. In Arkansas, that supports approximately 35,000 jobs annually About half of them are direct jobs in the construction and engineering and related industries, but about half of those jobs are general jobs within the community that are supported by that increased investment, which puts additional funds into the state. And the report also noted that about 600,000 of the jobs in the state are jobs in the tourist industries, manufacturing and retail sales, very critically reliant on the quality of the transportation system. And finally, as the report points out, one of the key sources of funding, in addition to state-generated funding, is federal dollars coming into the state, which are absolutely vital for paying for major construction projects or helping to pay for them. And the Federal Surface Transportation Program expires at the end of this month. And it's absolutely vital that Congress put in place a long-term, reliably and well-funded federal program. Now, Joe, I'll turn it back to you for any additional comments, and then we can respond to any questions.
So, Rocky, let me ask you a couple of overview questions. What is your sense of how Arkansas is doing compared to neighboring states or to states in general across the country?
Well, I think if you look at some of the numbers, what jumps out is one, the traffic fatality rate is significantly higher than the national average, and I know that involves improving infrastructure as well as education and enforcement. But clearly the state needs to, and local governments need to be addressing that. Overall pavement conditions, those numbers are higher than we see at the national average. And the growth in transportation and vehicle travel, again, is higher than the national average. Now the positives is that the state has generally had support from political leaders in the state, which is very positive. But I think our message in Arkansas would be the state needs to continue to make further progress in supporting transportation investment and also help as much as they can to ensure that federal funding and a strong federal program backstops the state investment as well.
Right, and I would certainly point out that during the last legislative session, a measure that had support from both Republicans and Democrats increased funding for highways, and now we're looking at the issue 1 vote in November that would continue to keep funding in place. Could you expand a little bit when we talk about what roads that need improvement cost the average motorist? So that is sitting in traffic with lost time and lost fuel. Could you expand a little bit on that, what that means?
Sure. There's really 3 areas where roadway deficiencies really impact the public. Obviously, reliability is absolutely vital. We haven't even really got into the reliability to manufacturers and trucking. You know, obviously the ability to move goods back and forth is critical. National polls routinely show transportation access is one of the top 1 or 2 issues that companies look at in terms of location. If they don't have good access, that's not a place they can expand. As a consumer, obviously you want reliability. You want to know that you could get back and forth from places. You could you know go around the region with your children, taking them places they need to go. It has a huge impact on your quality of life. It also has a huge impact on your ability to access employment, for employers to access employees. And finally, the safety feature is absolutely critical as the last component of that. I mean, I think obviously we would all like to think that our loved ones are driving on roads that are as designed as safe as they can be for that type of facility. And what we've seen in Texas, there was a great example where they went back and looked at a large section of their rural roads and went back and very cost effectively just made logical safety improvements that made sense for those facilities, and immediately saw a significant reduction in traffic fatalities. And we're really talking, you know, it's almost as an abstraction, talking about numbers. These aren't numbers. These are people that got home that night or avoided losing their lives or having serious injuries. So When you make those safety improvements, the benefits are immediate, and it's a gift that keeps on giving.
Okay. Now, I know the TRIP team is monitoring to see if we have questions from anybody looking in this morning. Do we have any questions? I'll look at the Q&A box.
Yeah, we do have one question from Monet Stevens at KAIT. Monet, I will unmute you, or I'll bring you into the discussion, so you'll be able to ask your question live of Joe and Rocky. So I just allowed you to present, so you should be able to ask the question. So go ahead.
Right. You guys can hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yes.
Go ahead.
Okay, so I just want to focus more on Northeast Arkansas, since that is our viewing area. What major highways do you guys think that need the most improvement in that area?
Well, so I would answer that a couple of ways. I think when I'm in Jonesboro, first of all, I would say that when we look at sort of traffic issues across the state today, there's no doubt that Jonesboro is one of our most rapidly growing urban areas. Traffic congestion is discussed a great deal there. So I think that's certainly an area that RDOT is paying close attention to. When I'm up there, I hear a lot from people about the drive from Jonesboro to Paragould, and how that can take a little longer than expected. My sort of core answer to that, and this really doesn't have a lot to do with TRIP, is the fact that I think when RDOT looks at the issues associated with issue 1, the work is spread evenly across the state. The new projects and the repair projects that are in the issue 1 package are spread across the state. And finally, I think one number I always use is that 90% of the road funding in Arkansas is going to the 50% of the roads that carry 90% of our traffic. So I do think funding revenue is organically going to the roads that are most heavily congested.
Yes, thank you so much.
Okay, thanks, Monet. And I see we've got a question also from Raleigh Hoyt with TVH 11 in Little Rock. Raleigh, I'll go ahead and allow you to ask your question now. So you should be able to use the controls now.
Thank you, Mr. Quinn, Mr. Moretti, and Ms. Kelly. Raleigh Hoyt, THV 11. Here's a big question, I guess, as it applies in general to highways, Mr. Moretti, and Joe, maybe you can address this as it applies to 30 crossing. If we go on the assumption that expanding highways leads to more traffic, how much diminishing returns is there in terms of how much it costs taxpayers as you expand highways? Like, how much do you really reduce how much it costs the average driver once you expand highways and spend a lot of money to expand highways?
So let's let Rocky answer that, but I want to preface Rocky's answer. He's not an expert on specific issues in Little Rock, but Rocky, why don't you address that sort of the diminishing return question in terms of what you see nationally?
Well, if you look across the country at the issue of traffic congestion, the question is reliability. And the reality is that the solutions to traffic congestion are multifaceted. It is making the overall system work more efficiently, and in some places capacity can be part of that. And Raleigh, you're right. We are in a world of limited resources, and so transportation agencies have to balance that. And what they recognize that in some urban areas, so that there are some capacity improvements, and sometimes it's as simple as improving an interchange or adding an interchange. In some cases, it might be some additional capacity, but it's also a variety of measures to make those roads, and also its arterial roads, move more efficiently. So states and local governments increasingly are improving traffic light coordination, for example. Traffic management and traffic information, particularly in this era where there's a variety of Google Maps and all these other resources also come to bear in that. So again, we feel like transportation agencies do a very good job of prioritizing that mix of projects. And so when we talk about the cost of traffic congestion, it's obviously the cost of a lack of reliability. And what we see that when the efficiency or the capacity of a system is improved, what we see is more economic transactions. We see people gaining more access to employment. We see manufacturers and also service industry being able to move more reliably. So again, it is really balancing those costs and benefits.
Do we have another question?
We do. I see we've got a question from Noel Ullman at the Arkansas Democrat Gazette. Noel, I've just unmuted you. You should be able to ask your question now.
Hey, no, oh, there you go. Hey, Noel.
Oh, we might have lost Noel. Noel, if you come back in a moment, we've got another question from Veronica Ortega with 5 News in Fayetteville. Let me find Veronica and I will unmute Veronica.
Hello?
Hi, Veronica.
Yep, Veronica, go ahead, please.
Hi, sorry if I'm making you repeat yourself, but I'm in Fayetteville, Northwest Arkansas, and we also cover the River Valley, which includes Fort Smith, the second biggest city in the state. I'm just kind of curious what roads in those 2 areas need improvements, what are the solutions, and how long before we see an improvement?
Well, and Rocky, let me just sort of localize the answer. I would say, Veronica, a couple of thoughts. When you speak to the average county judge or the average mayor in a small to medium-sized community, they make the case that in terms of what they need the resources to keep up on a month-to-month basis with the road repairs that they are trying to do. I think sometimes the stereotype in the transportation world is that we're talking about building new 8-lane superhighways, but very often this discussion is about rural roads doing non-glamorous things just to maintain those roads. So I don't think there's one big answer. If you and I were in a car right now driving from Fayetteville to Fort Smith, 49 is a beautiful road. But I think the fundamental need is what it has always been, giving local communities the resources they need to maintain aging roads. And maybe more, that's the big issue instead of large projects or large headline projects.
Thank you.
Sure. Did we get Noel back?
I just sent him another chat to see if he was able to.
Oh, Noel. Okay, Noel, I can see his question up on the screen. He's having a microphone problem, but I think this is a great question. And Rocky, your thoughts on this?
I'm sorry, I saw it on my screen briefly.
I will. So let me ask the question. What are your thoughts on post-pandemic travel? Like,
Sure.
what changes as a result of this new world we are headed into, even though no one really knows what that world looks like? What are your thoughts on transportation changes post-pandemic?
I think in general, I think what we're starting to see is that trends that were already occurring have been accelerated by this trend. And certainly, if you look at vehicle miles of travel across the country, and federal highways are posting these numbers every month, you obviously have this massive drop off in the spring through the summer months, getting closer to normal levels. And it seems, in some cases, in some states, it actually is already back to those levels. But certainly, you're also seeing changes at the urban level in terms of employment. While I doubt we'll have this environment where so many people are working from home, it seems like we'll see a greater share of people working from home beyond this. Public transit is a concern. It's very vital as part of the urban transportation landscape, but obviously we have seen a movement away from that right now for people's safety concerns. We'll see how that is impacted. And really, so outside of my expertise, but certainly part of the transportation equation. We're also seeing potentially what it looks like some more movement as people are working more virtually to secondary urban areas, more rural areas. All of these are going to impact the transportation landscape. We're certainly, looks like the significant increase in trucking that was anticipated probably underestimates that. So I think we're seeing a lot of trends accelerating that are going to impact transportation demand. The short-term challenge is a loss of state funding. And certainly Congress is still deliberating, and hopefully they will help states with that loss of funding so we don't see a lot of critically needed projects cut. But I think the overall long-term impact on transportation trends is just emerging. And that is going to be, I think, an important consideration that states and local governments have to address as they see where those shifts in demand occur.
And just a quick follow-up, Rocky, do you think that's radically different in urban versus rural areas in terms of the new world? I think you're spot on that urban areas will see more people working from home.
I mean, again, I think a year, 2 years from now, we'll really sort of have the final answer as for a variety of reasons. We likely move into an environment where people, feel safer, working in large groups and attending large events. And traditionally, that is also part of the transportation equation, obviously, is the movement of people into large events, sporting and entertainment events. So as we see those come back online and how general growth trends, again, between different parts of the country and rural and urban are, how those really settle down. But I think clearly the country as a whole has gone through a huge challenge, and we continue to go through that huge challenge. And it is certainly going to have impacts on a lot of decisions people make in the future in terms of lifestyles. And so, but at the end of the day, however those decisions play out, significant impact in surface transportation in our roads, highways, and bridges, our public transit systems, and our bike and pedestrian facilities are all going to be critical. In our report, we point out that bike and pedestrian facilities are very much part of the safety equation. And we've also seen through the pandemic that it's also, it's important in terms of transportation has been heightened. So again, it's an exciting time in the transportation world because a lot of our assumptions are really, coming to the forefront, and we're learning through this process.
Rocky, I think you're spot on. The Arkansas Good Roads Foundation is partnering right now with the Walton Family Foundation on a bicycle safety project. I think that has to be part of the conversation, and I do think that's being talked a lot about here. Couple of housekeeping issues. Reese Brewer is working on a safety report. Reese, absolutely, you can quote the trip report in that plan, and we will also be happy to do a follow-up phone call with you while you write that report. If you have follow-up questions, the folks at TRIP are probably as good at this as anybody in the country. So yes, feel free to quote it. The report obviously will be posted, and a Zoom recording of this call will be posted on the TRIP website in about 30 minutes after we finish. So logistically, Caroline is all over sort of giving you the tools you need after the news conference to follow up.
And Joe, I was just going to mention, and certainly myself, as well as Carolyn, are available throughout the day for individual interviews. All the contact information is included in all of the press materials. So, by all means, if you prefer a one-on-one interview, just get back to me.
Sure.
And we've also got local speakers in each of the urban areas who are available locally in each area for additional comments and additional local perspectives. Those contact information for them can be found on the advisory that you received this morning.
Rocky, here's another question. I think this is a great question. With people driving less, maybe a lot less, less fuel purchases. What do you think? What's your speculation on what that does to the finances of this whole conversation? Any thoughts on that?
Well, the estimate, and I don't have a number for Arkansas, is that nationally there's going to be $16 billion less collected by state governments in terms, mostly in terms of state motor fuel taxes, but also state tolls. Well, obviously, if you have $16 billion less, that means those are a lot of major projects to rebuild roads and bridges, to add bike lanes, to improve interchanges. That are going to have to be postponed. And now we see travel almost back to its pre-pandemic levels, and trucking probably is already there. So you may not be able to make the repairs, but the wear and tear in the system continues. So really that's why it's vital that Congress act on that. And then at the state level, notwithstanding the reduction in revenue, that they find a way to keep their investment levels at their current level.
I completely agree, and I certainly think, being out in our state, that the average county judge or mayor who will be dealing with potential revenue decreases from COVID does not need the next step to be reduction in available road budget. Caroline, any other questions? Or?
That looks like we've answered all the questions that are in the queue and in the chat. I will give just one more moment if anybody wants to type in an additional one or to let us know that they'd like to ask a question. But for now, I think that wraps up our Q&A.
Okay, and I'm going to just to briefly recap the logistics. The report will be up on both our websites. We have local leaders in the media advisory that you can localize quotes with. We are very aware that road issues sometimes vary very much from community to community. So one of our efforts today was to give you a local voice. That's in the media advisory. Caroline's number is on that. We will help you logistically with whatever you need today to localize the story. And so I think that's things we can do the rest of this day to sort of help out. Did I cover it, Caroline? Are we okay?
That should cover everything. And as Joe said, Rocky and I are both available, as is Joe today. So if there's any additional follow-up, please don't hesitate to get in touch with us.
All right, and Rocky, let's give you the final thought of the day. Give us the going away thought.
Well, the trip is really going across the country, doing similar events, and really the transportation system is so critical to our quality of life. And I think this pandemic has probably brought many things into focus, and this is one of them. But again, we think that the transportation system is going to be part of the solution and moving forward.
Thank you so much, everybody. Really appreciate your time this morning. I know this is not how we used to do news conferences, a bit of a new world for all of us, but then we certainly are around today to help you with the follow-up. So stay safe and drive safe. Thanks for being with us today.